The airport lights shimmered against the wide glass windows like a scattered constellation. Travelers hurried through the lounge with polished suitcases and neatly folded boarding passes in hand. Among them moved a young woman with a loose braid, worn jeans and a leather jacket resting over her shoulders. At first glance, she seemed like any other passenger, yet there was a steady intensity in her eyes that set her apart. She had saved for months to afford this first-class ticket, rewarding herself after years of hardship most people in that lounge would never fully understand. As she approached the gate, a flight attendant stepped in front of her with a courteous but firm smile. "I'm sorry, miss. First class is reserved for premium guests. You'll need to step aside." Calmly, she produced her ticket. "I have a first-class seat." The attendant glanced at the ticket, then at her scuffed boots and simple clothes. A faint smirk appeared. There must be some mistake. First-class passengers are expected to dress appropriately. Please wait while we reassign your seat. Nearby, a couple whispered and laughed softly. She caught the words. "She doesn't look like she belongs here." It wasn't the first time she had heard something like that. People rarely imagined that someone who looked like her could carry medals for valor or spend sleepless nights in foreign dust protecting her team. She had done exactly that, mission after mission, sacrifice after sacrifice. The attendant gestured toward the economy line. For a moment, the woman considered arguing. Instead, she caught her reflection in the polished, floor-tired eyes, a faint scar tracing her collarbone. Training echoed in her mind. "Control your breathing. Keep your voice steady." She nodded and quietly walked toward the back of the plane, while first-class passengers dismissed her with indifferent glances. As she lifted her jacket into the overhead bin, it slipped slightly, revealing ink stretched across her back: a trident, a dagger, and an eagle, the emblem of the United States Navy SEALs. The first person to recognize it wasn't a passenger. It was the pilot making his final walk through the aisle before departure. He froze mid-step, memories crashing into him: desert skies, smoke, frantic radio calls for air support. Years ago, a SEAL team had held their ground under fire, buying him the precious minutes he needed to escape with his life. He had never seen their faces, but he had never forgotten their courage. He cleared his throat. The attendant turned. "Captain, is there a problem here?" His voice was controlled, but firm. "She doesn't appear to meet first-class requirements. I was moving her to economy." He studied the ticket in her hand, then looked at her more closely. There was discipline in her posture, restraint in her expression. "Is that correct?" he asked gently. "I paid for first class," she replied evenly. "But if it's easier, for your crew I can sit in the back." He shook his head, glancing once more at the unmistakable tattoo. "Miss, you will not be moving to the back of this plane. Not today." The attendant looked confused. "Captain, do you know what that tattoo means?" he asked. She hesitated. "No, sir." "It's the mark of a Navy SEAL," he said quietly, but loud enough for nearby passengers to hear. "It belongs to those who fight so the rest of us can live in peace." A hush settled over the cabin. "When I was stranded overseas under fire, it was a SEAL team that answered my call," he continued. "I never saw their faces, but they saved my life. If you believe someone who earned that mark doesn't belong in first class, then you don't understand what it means to have earned it." The flight attendant's face drained of color. Passengers who had judged her moments before now stared with a mixture of shame and respect. The pilot placed a hand over his heart. "On this aircraft, she sits wherever she chooses, and as far as I'm concerned, that's right here." Emotion tightened her throat. She had never sought recognition. The tattoo was not a badge of pride. It was a memorial for teammates who never returned home. As the crew hurried to correct their mistake, she walked slowly back toward first class. The pilot accompanied her. "I don't know your name," he said softly, "but I owe you more than I can say." Her eyes glistened. "Then honor the ones who didn't make it back," she whispered. "Yes, that's who you owe." He nodded. Solemnly, as she passed through first class, passengers rose to their feet not out of spectacle but in quiet respect. She slipped into her seat and pulled her jacket over her shoulders, covering the tattoo once more. She didn't want applause. She wanted peace. The cabin doors closed, and the aircraft lifted into the night. City lights faded beneath the clouds. Leaning against the window, she breathed deeply, a single tear tracing her cheek. She thought of her team shared rations, shared laughter, shared danger, and of how often they had been unseen. Moments later, the pilot's voice came over the intercom. "Ladies and gentlemen, welcome aboard. Tonight, we are privileged to have someone among us who represents the very best of service and sacrifice." She would not want her name announced, but remember, these heroes often walk quietly beside us. The cabin fell silent. Some passengers placed hands over their hearts. Others blinked away unexpected tears. She closed her eyes. She didn't need praise. For the first time in years, she didn't feel invisible. Above the clouds, stars stretched endlessly across the sky. In the steady hum of the engines, she felt something she hadn't felt in a long time, a sense of belonging. She had been doubted and dismissed for not looking the part. Yet the mark on her back spoke louder than appearances ever could. Do not always stand in uniform under bright lights. Sometimes they move quietly through airports and city streets, carrying stories the world rarely sees. Respect is not measured by clothing or status. It is earned through sacrifice, through service, and through the courage to stand the line when others cannot.